we are looking at the situation. First of all, let's put the elephant in the room out of the room. The queues are back, even though Dangote has commenced production of PMS. Why do you think this is?
I think can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Right, thank you. I think one of the things that we need to understand about the queues that have emerged is that we have a very, very serious supply problem. And that's one of the things that we need to take cognizance of. The supply problem happens to be, as the NNC people put it, because there is an issue with being able to keep up with their debt obligations, and which of course means that international suppliers are opting for cash or crude cargoes in equivalent to be able to give us refined products. And so the NNPCL are now in a where there's over a $6 billion debt on ground, which they've not been able to clear out, which they have now admitted to, by the way. And of course, we also have the issue that those guys are not going to supply. So there's a lot of queuing up, and those queues are not clearing anytime soon. But we're also waiting for Dangote, the savior of Nigeria, to come on board, produce, and distribute his own inventory, which he said between I think Tuesday and Friday that he would hit the ground running on distributing it to all the stations. So I think that's just the sort of thing that we're waiting for. But right now, those queues are as a result of the fact that there is an imminent supply problem that makes it very difficult for the NNPC to get those import goods.
News reaching us is that there are about 3 vessels that are berthed in Lagos waiting to discharge their cargo. Perhaps that will bring some relief. But then again, looking at this story, which if you remember the time there was this bickering between NNPCL and Dangote with regards to the quota, the quantity of crude that was available to supply Dangote. Who would have known that NNPC had a shortfall and Dangote was begging them to meet their quota, what they had agreed to, and yet, even though they knew that they were indebted to the point of $6.8 billion US, that's about almost $7 billion US, they were still grandstanding.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is, I think we still haven't gotten to a point where the NNPC realizes that it cannot operate in isolation. There are a number of issues that are coming up, and really we can look at and say, look, this is not right. One is the way the NNPC is going around making its decisions. On one hand, telling Nigerians that they're not aware of any substantial debt, and also saying that it is not uncommon to owe debt in the sector. But then you turn around a couple of weeks after to admit that you're owing debt, though the amount was not stated, but almost agreeing with the popular speculation that it's about $6.8 billion worth of debt. And at the same time, you are also not being able to supply the crude that you're supposed to supply to the Dangote refinery to get all the issues sorted out. At the same time, the NNPCL at the same time are not really, at the initial point, they were having resistance in their attitude in trying to help to solve the problem. So what will I say? It's administrative oversight and negligence, regulatory rascality. I think that's the word I'm going to use, because I cannot explain why we're in a quagmire and then we are still having pride and lack of clarity and, of course, obscurity in getting out of that quagmire. To me, that doesn't really make any sense at all. And it's something that, you see, this reveals systemic issues that we need to address. So even after we've been able to clear these queues, right, either by hook or by crook, however we clear these queues, we still need to go back to the drawing board and say, year in, year out, through some people's lifetimes, queues have been surfacing, and it's the same problem. How do we solve it once and for all? And I think this is the most systemic conversation that we should be having.
Talking about what you just raised, and looking at the agreement that is before us, it seems as if NNPC is going to be the sole buyer of Dangote products for the Nigerian market. How does this in any way aid in abating this situation, especially on the backdrop of the Nigerian petroleum policy direction that is supposed to be market-driven?
Yeah, I think, the thing is this, right? It's supposed to be market-driven, ultimately. But for me, I have to wear the hat of the administration of the PIA as well as the realities on ground. So let's just take let's contextualize what's going on ground. If we allow it to be market-driven, it's going to 1, 2, 1, 3. That's the truth of the matter. And Nigeria is going to be able to afford it. And I know this because that is what the sort of price equilibrium along the West African corridor is coming to. And Nigeria is going to be able to afford it. The question is absolutely no. It's going to cause chaos. At the same time, let's even define what are the imperatives of a free market system. A free market system is where you have adequate supply to moderate the demand to be able to establish a fair price equilibrium. And that's what happens. So if you're not having enough supplies and you liberate the market almost completely, you are going to have a supplier's market. That means suppliers can come together and determine whatever the price is. So I think we're now caught up between a fully liberalized market and a monopoly, and then striking a balance is what the government has come up with, which is the monopsony. The monopsony is where they put a middleman there. It controls whatever happens, the interface between the Dangote refinery and the public, who are obviously the consumers, and that's really to create that buffer, more like a consumer protection. Because as I said, if you allow it to float, you're floating to 1,003, 1,004, and that's the reality. If we must stop, if we must ensure that it is in tandem with what we have in the West African corridor, but also remember, because we're not producing, the chances is going to be a supplier's market.
Now let's take some time and pull this apart. One of the reasons why you would say it would hit 1,400 naira would be because of the price in the international market, I guess. And then when you look at it again, one of the major reasons why the naira is where it is because of how much of it the dollar we use in importing this product. So, for instance, we kill buying from outside, and we, reserve some of the crude oil generated foreign exchanges that we have, and just concentrate on at least partially meeting our local demands. Don't you see a situation whereby the price of petrol would say play around the 600 naira margin, at least in the interim? Hello, Dr. Enang, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Did you hear the question, sir?
Yeah, absolutely.
So go ahead.
Let me start by giving you a fundamental, theory that every science student should relate with, and that is to say that energy cannot be created, not destroyed, but can be converted from one form to the other. What do I mean? You cannot create money in the sky. You can only convert it from one form to the other. So the question is, when you see things like that happen, the question is, what is the opportunity cost? Because you have to factor that in.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the fact that the government is giving crude in naira, the opportunity cost is that we are inadvertently reducing our dollar earnings. So the question you're going to ask is, okay, in the short term, the benefit of losing your dollar earnings, which of course you would have also used it to increase your reserve. How does it compare with the idea of, say, let's sell it in dollars, or let's still go ahead with our business and let them source whatever they want to source from outside, and then we earn our dollars. So you're losing something and gaining something, essentially. So what I'm saying is that if you're asking me and saying, well, Doc, how exactly, what don't you think the benefits are going to accrue if we do not even, get to...
having some...
At the same time, we are also having the opportunity cost of losing dollars because we are giving it in Naira. So something is going for something, and we do not know the net effect. But what we do know is that because a lot of feedstock of the stock, if we can give, what we do know, sorry, is that if we can give the feedstock in Naira, that there will be some very good benefits of getting that feedstock in Naira and also lifting it in Naira. But the question is, how much of the feedstock can we actually give to make a difference? Are we going to be in a position that we can give the 450,000 barrels per day to the refineries? And also, what is the compensation factor that would brought into view from a pricing standpoint if the Dangote refinery on one particular month needs to source for international inventories, needs to get maybe volumes. For some reason, we cannot give him even 200,000 on average per day, barrels per day, and it is abroad. That's just, there are a lot of questions. It's not like really clear to say, well, if we do this, it might reduce to 600, because when you're doing that, you have an opportunity cost, and economics is not just a unit economics. It's like there's a combination factor of a number of things that will come together to be able to determine the price of the crude. So we are giving out crude in Naira, but also losing our potential dollar earnings by doing that.
Some would say that perhaps on the other side of the argument would be that at some point in this country, we were producing 2.5 million barrels of crude per day. And here we are struggling with giving our local refiners 200,000 barrels per day. And on the flip side, of course, is also the argument that if we're able to push the crude that is demanded by Dangote, the product will not only be used in Nigeria, but also will be exported, and we will all in turn get foreign exchange. How does that play out in your calculation?
Well, so I'm going to tell you for free that there are some sort of, when you look at an economic projection, you almost want to look at, is this an optimist model or is this a pessimist model, right? And sometimes you want to strike a balance. An optimist model is to say, well, I'm going to start a farm. But guess what? Not only am I going to feed my family, I'm going to expand to feed a Akwa Ibom state, and at some point I'm going to feed the world. Man, that's the model. That's okay. But your assumptions, if we begin to text the reality index of your assumptions, we'll find out that a lot of it is very flawed fundamentally. Let's even get somewhere first. In my lifetime, I'll be excited to see us even meet the Nigerian consumption quota. And then we begin to talk about outside, because I don't want us to begin to use futuristic factors to determine more of the decisions that we take today. And at the same time, we are building an overly optimist model that is not going to pan out from a reality standpoint. How excited are you when you hear that the Port Harcourt refinery is going to start up in May? It's going to start up in June. It's going to start up in July. It's going to start up in August. That's an optimistic model. Has it started up in reality? No. We strike a balance between the optimism and the reality, and that's why I tell people, always have a cautious optimism. And when you're doing your sensitivity analysis, ensure that you've covered the broad spectrum of best and the worst case scenario, and that your governing case for your risk management, of course, which you're trying to achieve to make sure it is as low as reasonably probable, is your worst case scenario. Do not build your risk management on the best case scenario. It's going to fail.
Well, very well laid out there, which even beggars that question. The intentions and the motive of those who drive this sector